Hello, Canadian Sasquatch here with a how the Squatch makes mead. So I've had a couple people ask how I go about making my mead. So I was getting ready to make a new batch, and I figured I'd videotape it start to end. Should be about a year-long process if everything goes well. So what I did was last January I had made a batch of Blood Orange Mead. It came out okay, nothing spectacular at this point. I bottled it at the exact 1 year mark, so January 25th, 2014 is when I bottled it this year. And that's this guy right here. So it's made with Wahila honey and blood oranges. It's got an ABV of 11.3%. And here it is in the glass. I don't know how well you can see that. It's very clear. It's a golden amber. It has floaties from the cork, but this was the first one of the first batches that I've properly corked, so I'm still learning how to use the corker that I was gifted. So yeah, it has a alcohol smell to it, sweet. So I'll give it a taste here. Cheers. It definitely has alcohol flavoring. I can taste the Wahila honey. What Wahila is, it's a plant that's native to South Texas, so it's a Texas-only honey. It's very sweet, very light, kind of like clover. I really like it. It goes very well with citrus. I've used it with the blood oranges. I've used it with regular oranges. I've used it with grapefruits. So this is what I did a year ago, and I decided, well, it's blood orange season, so time to make another batch. I'm thinking I may, for as long as I can, every year make a 3-4 gallon batch. So that's what I decided to do, was redo this. But I have learned a lot in the past year on making mead. So I want to take that knowledge that I've learned throughout the year and put it towards the next batch. So things that I would like this new batch to do is, one, retain the orange flavor and aroma, and two, the blood orange coloring. For those of you that know, blood oranges are very, very red in the fruit, hence the name blood orange. So I'll insert a picture right about now. So as you can see, it's basically blood red. So I want to retain that color. So my thought is try and get about a gallon of orange juice and the zest from all the oranges, and mix them all up and have a nice color and aroma and taste. So that's the end plan, is a good blood orange tasting mead. How do we achieve that? Well, first thing you need to do is protect the color. The orange flavoring and aroma, we can add that later using zest and more juice as needed, but protecting the color will be key. So first thing I did was I went out and I did a bunch of research on yeast, because there are some yeast out there that are designed to protect the color of red wines. So I am using a yeast. It's a Lauven's RC 212. It is designed, it is a red wine yeast that is supposed to help retain the color of red wines as it goes throughout the fermentation process. Great, I have a yeast. I would like as much help as possible, so I did some more research, and there are some nutrients out there called OptiRed, which helps the yeast do their job in fermentation, keep them healthy and strong, and OptiRed also helps to retain the red color, or yeah, the red in the red wines that it's used for. I'm like, great, I'll use some of that as well. So I've got yeast and I've got some nutrient to help with the color. The next thing is you also need to keep those yeasts very healthy so that they do their job. Mead is actually fairly hard to ferment because when you get down to it, it is honey and water. That is, honey, water, and yeast. If you just use those three ingredients, then you can create what's called a show mead. As soon as you start adding anything else to it, it becomes a traditional, if there's like no other spices or fruits or flavorings or whatever, or melomels or methanolmels or any of those other various terms. But basically it boils down to water and honey and the yeast. Honey doesn't really have any nutrients in it. It's got a lot of sugar, so the yeast will be able to eat lots, but just like humans, we need other nutrients to survive. Like we could live off of table sugar for a while because it will have the calories we need, but it's devoid of the nutrients that we need to function correctly. So we have to add nutrients. So I did research on that, and through the past year I've learned that yeast needs something that's called YAN, Y-A-N, which is yeast assimilated nitrogen. So you have to add nitrogen to the must so that the yeast can be happy, and the nitrogen is the proteins that is needed. So there's several different types of proteins or nutrients or nitrogen. The big one that a lot of people use is DAP, diammonium phosphate. It's an inorganic nitrogen supplement or nutrient for the yeast. So that's one of the big ones because it has a lot of the nitrogen in very little amount, so you don't have to use that much of it. But from my research, I've noticed that it's only good after the fermentation has just started. So right after the lag phase, that's when you pitch the yeast and nothing happens in the airlock, and then all of a sudden the airlock's bubbling away. That's the lag, the time between the pitching and the bubbling. For my research, the yeast can only really assimilate that very, very well right at the end of the lag phase. So after that, it seems they prefer organic yeast. And luckily, there's a product called Fermade O, which is Fermade organic. They also have Fermade K and M and all these other ones that have different nutrients, inorganic nutrients designed to use in countries to meet those countries' standards and the like. But in North America here, we can use Fermade O, which is an organic yeast. So before we were so rudely interrupted by my camera running out of memory, I was talking about how in North America we can use Ferment O for our nutrients for the yeast. So that's DAP, Ferment O, OptiRed, and then you also want something to help the yeast kick off right off the bat. So you need something to help it. The dry yeasts, when you're rehydrating them, they make a product called Go Firm that helps to that has a bunch of nutrients that the yeast can use right off the bat while it's rehydrating. So you mix a slurry of that with some water, put the yeast into that, and let them sit for 20-30 minutes, and they will be super happy and continue on. So that's the nutrients. So the next thing I need to figure out is how much I want to make and what sweetness level and stuff. So I know from my experience that my beautiful bride and I, we like a semi-sweet mead. So I usually like the gravity be around 10-20 when it's done. So trying to guess, and I don't like using chemicals too much, the sulfates and the sorbites, to kill the yeast, so I like to do it naturally. So what I do is I step feed the honey. So what that means is it goes down, the yeast chugs through the yeast until it bottoms out at like 1.000 or 1.1010 or whatever. So what then I do is I add honey to back sweeten it up to 1020. Then the yeast will do their thing again, chug going down, back down to 1010 or 1.000, at which point I back sweeten it up to 1020. And I just keep doing that until it stabilizes at 1020, at which point I know the yeast aren't going to do anything more. So that's a good spot. So now I know what sweetness I want. And using the particular yeast that I've chosen, it'll give me about a 12 to 14% ABV. So then the next thing is what size batch. I like to do a 4-gallon batch. That gives me because I have a 3-gallon carboy that I can use, and then the other gallon can go into a 1-gallon carboy. At which point I can, in the 1-gallon one, I can experiment, I'm thinking this time around, I may put some oak into that to see how it goes. So yeah, so I will have a 4-gallon batch, and I'm actually videoing this after I made it, so I know that I didn't have as much juice as I thought I would have, because I had 33 oranges and I figured I'd hit around a gallon of juice, but I got just over half a gallon. So you can ignore that little bit, because I actually do go for a 4-gallon batch anyways. So yeah, so with that, roughly 10 pounds of honey, which is almost a gallon. 12 pounds of honey is a gallon. So yeah, go from there. So almost a gallon of honey, half a gallon of juice, and then water to the 4-gallon mark, and there it is. So now that I know how much I'm making, I just gotta figure out how much of the nutrients to use. And there's calculators out there and whatnot, and the yeast I use, I'm going to be using, they like a lot of nutrients, so I'll be putting in quite a bit. The overall will be about 10 grams of Go Firm right off the bat for the yeast, and then 2 grams of DAP, along with 25 grams of Fermate O and 5 grams of the Opti Red. So, and I'll be splitting that up. So like I mentioned, Go Firm right off the bat while rehydrating the yeast. The DAP, and then a third of the Fermate O and a third of the Opti Red. I'll create a little slurry and toss those in right after the leg is done, so that the yeast have some nutrients right then and there. I'll be aerating and mixing daily, which is new to beer brewers, we all do not want oxygen touching our beer once the yeast are in there. But with mead making, up to the 1/3 to 1/2 sugar break, that's continuing to aerate and mix it up so that the yeast continually to get some oxygen. It just helps the yeast be happy and healthy, and it does not affect the final product. It makes it better because the yeast are happy. So yeah, at the 1/3 mark, I'll be adding the rest of the, or another third of the OptiRed and the Fermento, and then at the final sugar break, the half point, I'll add the rest of it. So that's the plan. The next video will be me actually dealing with the oranges and the honey and mixing it all together. And then after that will be right after the lag phase when I add some nutrients. And then after that will be just me checking it daily, aerating it, checking the gravity to see where I'm at, if I'm at the sugar breaks to add the extra nutrients, and just adding the honey when I need to. And then after that we'll let it do its thing for a little bit, and then I'll rack it into secondary, where it'll be racked onto the orange zest in the 3-gallon container for sure, probably also in the 1-gallon, which I may, like I mentioned before, add some oak. And then after that, it's just letting it sit there and do its thing for several months, and then after that, racking it off the zest and oak and whatnot into a third vessel and just let it age in that for the remainder of the 365 days that I'm planning on doing this. So I will test it on that day, taste test, and see if it's ready to bottle. If not, we age it more. If it's ready, we bottle it and let it age in bottles. So yeah, so pay attention to this channel. I will create a I don't know what you call it, bookmarks or folder or whatever in YouTube to keep track of my mead making for this particular one as I go through the process. So hopefully you learned something. Oh, the other thing I should mention is I'll be using no heat in the process, as beer brewers always want to boil the crap out of everything to sanitize and make sure everything's all happy and whatever. I don't put heat to anything. It's the honey just room temperature, the water's room temperature. It just goes in, mixes, no boiling. You heat the honey, you lose the flavor. You heat the fruit, you lose the flavor. So yeah, you don't really want to add too much heat to it. So yeah, so again, thanks for watching. It's going to be a long process. Hopefully we all learn something in the process. And so yeah, cheers and happy mead making.